So first off, I want to thank the grace of heaven and the virtues of the masters, the mercy of the grand predecessors, transmitting masters, and everyone here today for the opportunity to talk about this topic, how peerage is, well, how peerage in heaven is determined. This is actually, it turns out to be related, or very related, to the topic of the 5 requirements or conditions to return to heaven. So it's basically kind of it's the same. It's basically the same, but it's presented in a different way. So this is actually this material is from the Fengtian temple. So those maybe in Fengtian, they may have heard the Chinese class given. But okay, so, and also, I guess maybe in the spirit of this Halloween, there are spooky stories in here. Okay, maybe not spooky, but this is told in the form of a lot of stories. Okay. Okay. All right. So, since the ancient times, cultivators, they weren't afraid of hardships. Okay, they traveled. They were willing to travel great distances to seek the enlightened master, right? Who can, and find or obtain the secret of immortality. The goal, of course, was to find the way to transcend the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, and to attain immortality as a Buddha. Otherwise, if we just cultivate blindly based on, what we think, then, how can we achieve that goal, right? So the story of this, there's this old couple. The old man, he was a butcher, right? And the old woman always recited the sutras in the morning. Okay. So they agreed to make sure that the other, or they woke up, if whoever woke up first would wake up the other person, the other one. And so, right. And then so they basically lived by this arrangement for, the rest of their lives. So after they passed away, Yama, who's he's like the king of the underworld. Okay. So he invited the old man, the husband, to go to heaven. Whereas he judged the old woman and sent her to the underworld. Now, of course, the old woman, was not pleased at this result, and she complains, says, "Hey, I've recited the sutras every day. How is it that I am sent to the underworld?" Then Yama said, "Well, you recite the sutras every day, so you should have a compassionate heart. But instead, you keep reminding your husband, you wake him up and remind him to go and slaughter animals." Okay. And although your husband is killing animals, he has the good heart to remind you to recite sutras. Okay. So this is kind of it sounds like a joke, but a little funny story. But so, the old woman, she recited sutras all her life, obviously with the goal of returning to heaven. But unexpectedly, she ended up in hell. Okay, so the reason for this is that, she didn't really know the goal of cultivation, right? So if we don't know that our direction, that we are cultivating in the right direction, then, basically it's not worth it. It's not worth that effort. I mean, it's wasted effort. Okay, so basically you can say that, she was kind of cultivating an appearance only, right? That she, even though she recited the sutras, she didn't really act. I mean, she didn't follow what the sutras were teaching. Okay. And so, if she, just like what Yama said, if she, had basically practiced, what the sutras were teaching, then, she would not, be encouraging or motivating her husband to go kill animals, right? So basically, the point here is that we it's very important that in our cultivation, we do not blindly cultivate and we think, oh, we just, practice the forms, but we don't really understand. We don't know the meaning. I mean, we don't know what we're really doing, and what the ultimate, the consequence or the result will be. So that's why, we learn, we understand, we have to learn the principles, like for causality and karma, so that, if we understood that, one of the things is that, one of the principles is, there's, we do not encourage, so even though we may not, let's say, kill animals, but we should not encourage others to do it either. Okay. And in fact, we should do the opposite. We should encourage them to stop killing. Okay. So, that's basically, so we have to, understand what we're doing. Don't just blindly, cultivate. And unfortunately, there are, of course, many people who practicing religions and stuff, and they're a lot of them are doing good, and they are trying to practice the teachings, and to follow the principles, but, some of them just kind of going through the forms only. And so, if they expect that to have a good, result in the end, they'll be quite disappointed. Okay. All right. Okay. So, the rise and fall of the soul. Right, so there are basically these 10 realms of existence. Okay, it can be, we can be animals, be a hungry ghost, we can be like suffering in hell, the underworld. Become an asura. An asura is one who's they've cultivated, but they still have like the 3 poisons, or they have like greed, or they have a bad temper. So basically they have merit, but they don't have virtue. Okay, so or they don't have enough virtue, and so they become an asura. Asuras are interesting because they also, they do the bidding of of God, I guess, of heaven. But what they do is kind of give tests. To give to tempt us cultivators, and to that's part of it. What they do, so that's kind of interesting. So, but okay, and then also so we have humans as well, and then we have devas. Devas are you can say deities, saints in the celestial heaven, temporary heavens. Sravakas, who are hearers, or we basically they're on the path to becoming an arhat. An arhat is basically one who's cultivating for themselves only. Okay, so they're as opposed to a bodhisattva. Okay, you can say that Pratyeka Buddha is also you can say cultivating on their own, and for themselves, not really trying to help others, and they kind of, you can say they kind of attain kind of a, I don't know, this Pratyeka Buddha is like a solitary Buddha, so they're not like, they haven't really become one with okay, but whereas the Bodhisattva and the Buddha, so these are higher levels. Bodhisattva, will become a Buddha. Okay. The technical, the real difference is that bodhisattvas, they stay, they stay in the world, or they, constantly come back to the world to, perform the mission, fulfill their vows. The vows, of course, is helping, faring sentient beings. Okay. That's essentially, so bodhisattvas and Buddhas. Okay. Good. Okay. So these are actually, known as the 10 Dharma realms. So how's the rise and fall within these 10 realms determined? Okay, so there's karma, depending on the weight of good and bad karma, so, based on the principles of causality, one's habitual character. Okay, so habits, basically we all have habits, and, that can be difficult to change. And these are basically, you can say they're accumulated. Okay, so, and then the third is mindset, our mindset. Okay, so basically it includes everything, thoughts, attitude, maybe our emotions at the time of death. Okay, so this is basically the power, at the time of death, if we have attachments, we have a strong emotion, strong something, that will become, that's a very powerful force that will lead us to the next life. And it depends, where it leads us depends on whatever that is, that emotion or whatever the type of emotion or the mindset that we have. Okay, so the first two, which is, talking about the karma and the habitual character, those are built up over lifetimes, right? Many lifetimes, and slowly accumulate and form, you can say, within our subconscious. Okay, so of course, everything is stored within the eighth consciousness, the alaya consciousness. Okay, so that's like the black box that records everything in all our lives. Okay, so but then, but this is kind of, you can say these are kind of like a habit tends to be kind of subconscious action, right? Because we don't have to think about it. It's just almost automatic. Okay, so but when the power of mind is insufficient, so if we don't have a strong, let's say a strong determined mind, and of course we're talking about having a proper mind, then those two factors, the karma and the habitual character, they will kind of lead us to our next our destiny, right? They influence our thoughts, our behavior, and even our fate. Okay, so at the time of death, then due to the principle of, you can say, like attracting like. Okay, so the rebirth will be in a similar realm. So, right. So again, so that's why it's important. The Buddhas say, it's holy teacher, they keep telling us we have to let go of attachments. Attachments, as far as we are concerned, our attachments are to this world, right? To the things in this world, people in this world, everything is within this world. And so if we still have those attachments, and we feel strongly about them, then it's a force that pulls us to this world. Okay, so that's why, so we have to let go. So relinquishment, right? We have to let go of these things in order to be free of this world, right? If we think that we want to transcend this cycle of birth, death, rebirth, then we have to let go of those things that keep us here. Okay, so all right. Okay, the other thing, basically we can see how, I guess, I don't know, I don't know if this is really, someone's proven this, but, when we see a person's, how they look when they pass away, when they die, okay, so as we can see their, the facial features, changes to those features at the time of death, whether the body is stiff or supple or flexible, right? So, that we know. We've, many of us have experienced that when we have seen a Tao cultivator who has passed away, and then whether their appearance or complexion is proper, lively or not, then we can know if the person ascends to heaven or falls into hell. Okay, so kind of these three different categories. So if the facial features are proper and the body is supple, the complexion is like that of a living person, then the person has obtained the Tao, and spirit and the spirit has entered the state of bliss, right? So it's basically, you hear the phrase or saying, people are, what is it? Scared to death or whatever. But most people are fearful of death, and so because they don't know. Well, it's like the great unknown. They don't know what's going to happen next, where they're going to go next, or if that's the end of that's it. And so there's fear because they don't know what's going on, what's going to happen. But those who've received the Tao have cultivated themselves, then they know where they're going, and so they can be at peace when they leave this world. Okay, so that's why they would have, the body would be relaxed, right, supple, as opposed to stiff. Okay, and then they would kind of look like as if they're alive. Even, in medical science cannot really explain this. This is one of the mysteries, why some people are, the rigor mortis does not, or they don't become a stiff right after they die. Okay. So, and then, okay. So, now if the body is stiff, right, complexion features express terror, then the spirit has entered the underworld. Okay. So anyone who didn't go to heaven, okay, in the first, not in the first category, the first type, they all report to the underworld. But, where do they go next? Okay. It's just, that's a place where it's like a waste. It can be a place where they stay to be punished and suffer for a while. Or they can be sent to a different place. So that would be the third one. So in this second one is basically, they are being sent to the underworld to be punished and suffer, okay, in hell. That's not forever. That's, that would be, whatever, once they've gotten their punishment, is completed, then they'll reincarnate again, okay. And then how they reincarnate or where they go next is, again, depends on karma, okay, everything they've done in the past. Okay, so then the third one, so if the body is, so it's basically like that second one, except that there's also, you can say, a panic-induced or distortion of the shape of the body. Okay, so this they call a, disguised form, which means that the soul may have transmigrated to one of the 4 forms of birth. So this means that, they went to another, instead of going and suffering in the underworld, they are reborn as basically an animal. Okay, so the 4 forms of birth are the womb. They're born from a womb. So basically most mammals are like this. Okay, so it's basically, you can say live birth. Okay, the second is if they're egg born. Okay, born of eggs. So for example, birds. The third is you're born in the water, so like fish or any aquatic creatures. And the fourth is you can say born of transformation. So this is like some like insects, right? They tend to go through metamorphosis, some transformation, and when through their life cycle. Okay. So the eyes, ears, nose, and mouth are the doors to the 4 forms of birth, right? So basically, the eyes. Well, basically the principle here also says that because these 4 pathways, okay, they're unclean, okay, they're impure. Why? Because I guess the way they explain it says that the eyes has tears. The ears have wax, the nose has, the mucus, I guess, and the mouth has the saliva, okay. But so if the soul goes through one of them, then it will be reborn in the respective form of birth. So like the eyes, we say that if, sometimes you see a dead person and, I don't know, there's like, their eyes are open, okay, when they die, and they stay open. And that's like they've probably, their soul left through the eyes, so not through the, obviously the heavenly portal. And so they are reborn as birds in the next life. Okay, why? Because the eyes means that, so for birds, they have very acute vision. Okay, their vision is very good. And so that's associated with the eyes. The ears, basically, they're reborn. Sometimes you see some dead person has bleeding from the ear, so maybe they left through the ear. And basically that means that they are born as basically one of those womb-born mammals. And usually we say like for like horses, dogs or like cows, things like that. And because their hearing is good. Okay, so again, they have acute hearing. If we went through the nose, so that implies the smell is, they have acute smell, and we know that insects have very acute sense of smell, because we know that. I mean, it's like we leave food out and, suddenly the ants or flies or whatever start appearing. And so but, realize that insects are kind of lower. I would say they're kind of lower. I would say that they're probably the lowest form of, physical being, in the animal world. Okay. So because they are kind of, scattered, their soul is kind of scattered among many insects, right? Right. Usually, I mean, you don't just have like one ant or like one bee or one fly, right? There's always a whole swarm of them. Okay. So, they're all together. That it's basically the one, from a person, their soul, their spirit is basically split among all those, insects, okay, in the swarm. Okay. So it's very difficult if we are reborn as that insect to regain human life. Okay, so I mean, this had to have done some pretty bad stuff for this to happen. Okay, and then finally, for the mouth, of course, aquatic, sea life. Okay, they're well, like fish, for example, their mouths are always opening, right, opening and closing, and so is the mouth. And that's the way they breathe. They have to breathe through the mouth, through the gills. Okay, so then that means if the mouth is open, then they're reincarnated into as an aquatic animal, aquatic creature. Okay, so yeah, okay. So these are kind of one. This is kind of. Yeah, I mean, I've never seen this third, well, I don't know. I have not seen, like the I don't know, maybe the last one or two, anyways. I've seen more of the first situation, because we're usually attending the funerals of Tao Kin, people cultivating, so. But definitely I have seen that, where the person is not stiff. Okay. Okay. So, so talking about karma, this is from Holy Teacher's 101, I don't know, words of guidance or whatever. I'm not sure exactly the title, but so Buddhists say, attainment in heaven is determined by achievement in this world. Right, so how is the attainment of peerage determined? Okay, peerage also, you can say it's like rank, rank or title, whatever, position. Okay. Future attainment does not depend on the size of this is Holy Teacher is saying, future attainment does not depend on the size of the temple or the Tao community, right? Nor does it depend on how many temples we have. It is even less dependent on a comparison of the number of Tao kin. Okay, so rather it is about whether Tao kin truly cultivate and refine themselves, uphold and practice precepts, do not have any greed, do not argue and contend, make effort to perfect or harmonize the heart, mind, and spirit, and complete their life mission. Okay. It is also not, do not emphasize and focus on the number of temples or Tao kin, which can create thoughts of competing for possession of temples or people. This is incorrect. Okay, a slight deviation will cause scheming, which leads to a decline. We must know that heaven determines whether we rise or fall based on our moral character or our virtues, precepts, practicing the precepts, our mindset, fulfilling our vows, and forbearance. So it is not based on any external forms. Okay, so the ultimate determination of rise and fall and level of attainment is based on basically these 5 criteria, so the moral character or virtues, the precepts, mindset, fulfilling vows, and forbearance, and has nothing to do with the external forms. So as humans, even cultivators are still kind of fixated on the forms, external forms, like, oh wow, you have to have so many temples, you have to have so many people in the temple, all these things. Or, they might be fixated on even, maybe not those tangible forms, but like even merit, as that's also a form. These things. We can't do that. Okay, so, and Holy Teacher, also talks about this in terms of, we can't go like, go to other temples and kind of steal their people, their Daokin, to have them join our temple instead. It's like, that's a big no-no. We cannot be doing these things. Okay, so ultimately it's not helpful for, in our cultivation, and it's not helpful for us. I mean, we cannot achieve our goal, to return to heaven, and gain some peerage there, if we do these things. Right, so this is something that we have to definitely keep in mind. So, wherever people are, wherever they're cultivating, they have an affinity to be there. And so, sometimes, maybe affinity changes, but we cannot forget our roots. Okay, so even though, let's say, I received the Tao at one temple, but my affinity or karma or whatever takes me somewhere else. I move somewhere else, and we don't have a temple there. But there's another, temple which is part of a different unit or the branch of the Tao. And it's okay. I mean, as long as there's agreement on both sides that to join over there to practice, to learn. But ultimately, we remember where we came from. And so, wherever temple, wherever branch or unit, lineage that we're in, we're always in that, we're always there. Okay, so it's, and ultimately we should return back to that. Okay. All right. Okay, so talking about this moral integrity, or moral, you can say moral character, or virtues. It's basically the expression of our heavenly nature. Okay, our true nature, our heavenly nature, our divine nature. So the importance of moral character, right? Moral character or virtues, I mean, it's the quality and nature of the mind and spirit. And it includes basically, tolerance and being forgiving, right? Love trustworthiness, filial piety, all these things. So any virtue you can think of, basically. Having moral integrity is not this way because, we think this is how it should be and we force ourselves to do it. Okay, but rather it's wanting to help others from deep within the heart. Okay, so again, it's not, someone tells you, you have to do this, you have to do that, and then you just do it. It has to come really that you can say that motivation or that the intention or whatever has to come from within. Okay, has to come from that within the heart, and also not. It should be. We always use the term the wu wei, right? The non-motive, the motiveless intention. I guess I don't know. So those who are loving, when they see people in difficulties or suffering, will automatically want to help. Okay, so those are loving. I mean, you could say, they have empathy, they have compassion. Okay, after seeing people overcome their difficulties, then their heart is full of joy. So this is very much, this is a bodhisattva, would be Buddha is like this. Okay, so because why? Because again, it's like they're one body. I mean, it's there's no separation. Okay, there's no dualism here. There's no duality. It's just one. And so when others are happy, then we're happy. Okay, when others are suffering, we are suffering. Okay, so obviously, that's kind of the mindset, if you will, that we need to have. Those who are tolerant can easily forgive other people's mistakes and will not brood or bear a grudge over them. Okay, so this one I think is harder to do. It's probably for many people harder to do than the first one. Basically, we tend to, as humans, we tend to focus on the negative, on the bad side of things when we see, because we assume that people should do the right thing, and then when they don't, then that obviously that stands out, and we become fixated on that, and so it's definitely hard to. Then it becomes hard to forgive them, okay, or tolerate it. But this is something that we have to overcome. Okay, so the Buddha say having Tao without having virtues results in becoming a demon. Right? Remember I mentioned the Asura. The Asura. Basically, they were cultivating, so they were following, or initially maybe they started out on the path of, following the Dharma, but they didn't cultivate well. They performed merits, but they didn't really cultivate the virtues, and so then they become a demon, an asura. Okay, so losing the bodhi heart or mind. But cultivating good dharmas is called a demon karma. Okay, so clearly it is important to nurture virtues, right? So it's just So we can't just do merits and not, let's say, get rid of our anger, our temperament, or greed. These things we have to overcome those too. So it's don't think that if I ferry lots of people. I'll have enough merits to kind of make up for my, lack of, kind of the internal aspect of not having like anger, things like that, or bad temperament. That's not. These are like two different things. So, so we still have to work on that aspect as well. Okay. All right. So to kind of illustrate that, basically, I guess people would call the restoration sage, I guess, the Yan Hui. Okay, so he was a disciple of Confucius. Restoration sage. I mean, that's kind of like one of the literal translation of that. But he's basically considered to be like a copy of Confucius. Okay, so I mean, like. He basically practiced everything that Confucius taught, okay, and did it better than any of the other disciples. All right. So Yan Hui is considered to have the highest moral character, or virtues. Okay, so he was always praised by Confucius, such as saying he's not lazy, he doesn't boast about how good he is, he doesn't shirk his responsibilities or toss aside his or push away any responsibilities. He doesn't get angry at anybody who's not to blame. Okay, it doesn't mean that he doesn't get angry at people if they deserve it, but okay. So it does not make, and he doesn't. This is the one of the qualities, if you will, or characteristics, is that he does not make the same mistake twice. So, I don't know how many people can make that claim. Basically, we all know sometimes, we make a mistake, but then we forget later on, and then we make the same mistake. But he doesn't. Okay, so but not only that, it's actually in his mind too. Having the thought, right? Actually, making same mistake twice is when we have the thought and then we act on it. Okay, so that's actually two mistakes. So the first mistake was having the wrong thought. Okay, so he doesn't have the wrong thought. Okay. And then he never violates or goes against benevolence, okay, or compassion. He lives in poverty, but he's always, you can say, happy and content. So there's one story about Yan Hui. Okay, so obviously he, excuse me, he lived in poverty, and Confucius wanted to help him. Okay, but Yan Hui never accepted any financial or, excuse me, or any kind of material assistance. But so Confucius kind of thought of a way. Okay, so basically he wrapped up some a gold bar, or gold ingot in paper, in a piece of paper, and placed it where Yan Hui would see it, right? And he had written something on it. Okay, so when Yan Hui, because basically Yan Hui kind of takes this path when he goes to and from his home, and so he saw this package, and he read the words that were written on it. It says, "Heaven has gifted this gold bar to Yan Hui." He opened it and saw that, well, yeah, indeed it was a gold bar. Although he was impoverished, right, he wasn't tempted though. So he rewrapped the gold bar and wrote on the outside, right, "This gold bar is not for one who is fated to be in poverty." Right, then he left it in the same spot and walked away, naturally and carefree. So Yan Hui, he demonstrated that, he was content with poverty. This was he accepted his fate, so to speak, and at least in terms of material, in the material sense, okay, and he was willing to just lead a simple and virtuous life. Therefore, we can see that he was of high moral integrity and self-restraint. Right? It is no wonder that Confucius transmitted the heaven's mandate to Yan Hui. And now, unfortunately, that actually, Confucius wanted to, and maybe he did transmit it to him, but Yan Hui, he died young. I think it's like 32. And so, Confucius was definitely heartbroken over his death. And so, but, so eventually, Confucius had to pass it on to Zhenzi, okay, another disciple. But, so, yeah, how many people, can not can kind of overcome this temptation? I mean, but actually, we do hear stories in the news sometimes of people who've, and they're not wealthy people. They're either they're probably not even. I mean, sometimes you hear the stories of people who are relatively poor, and yet they found like a bag of money or something, and they turn it in. And so these are they have good moral character there. Okay, so I'd say, most people or many people would probably keep it for themselves. Okay, so that's the difference. I mean, we, as cultivators, we definitely need to, be more like Yanhui. Okay, and we shouldn't take anything that's really not ours. Okay, all right. Not having complaints and mistakes is called merit. Okay, this is by a holy teacher. He says, there's this chemical factory that produces our states of mind. Okay, so no matter how bad things are, we just have to deal with it in tolerance and speak beautiful words. Okay, speak good words. No matter how bad people are, we just have to deal with them in tolerance. With tolerance, right? Then it is possible to cause them to become very good people, right? So again, how we treat others, despite the fact that they maybe mistreat us, if we treat them well, they're likely to change how they treat us and others as well. I mean, we can basically move them. Okay, so this is not easy to do, obviously. As long as we have diligence, magnanimity, self-restraint, and aspiration, then we can do it. Holy teacher is saying. Okay. If what we say is, "Oh, it's not my problem, it's not my mistake," then we are too far from the ideal. If in any situation, no matter who made a mistake, but we take it as our responsibility, right? Or we take the blame ourselves, then with such broad-mindedness of giving credit, right, while taking the blame, how can we not be admired by others, right? I mean, I think this is true. When we see this in others, definitely we definitely admire them. Okay, admired their virtues, their moral character. But how many of us can actually do this? It's very difficult sometimes. Giving credit to others, we tend to say, "Oh, that's mine. That was my idea. I did that." Okay, we don't say, "Oh, this is someone else did it." Okay, or there's something bad, a mistake or something that happened. And we just say, "Oh," we start pointing the finger, say, "Oh, this person, that other person did it," rather than say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake." That's I know, me too. It's like it's hard to do that. It's hard to take the blame when we are not to blame. Okay. So we should learn from what Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi said. Basically, to be modest and open-minded. We see the water flowing to the lowest point. And so with modesty and open-mindedness, we should embrace virtues and nurture virtues. Then we can collect everybody's good qualities to become our own good qualities, right? So we should learn, definitely, I mean, like I said, sometimes we see these qualities in others, but we should definitely try to adopt them, and use those, try to gain those qualities ourselves. Okay. So basically, if you, if you look at all the, our predecessors, the grand predecessors, patriarchs, right? They all have these great, qualities within them. Whether they're humble, modest, they're very yielding, they don't contend, they always give opportunities to others, they don't gossip, and they don't talk about other people's mistakes. And there's always, they always respect others, and also they're very approachable too, very kind, loving, caring. Okay. And they also take responsibility. Okay, so I mean, I'm not really familiar with like the Fengtian their temple, that unit, their predecessor is Tsuning Bodhisattva. Okay, that's the title. But so she has a lot of these qualities, and the same with our in our temple, the Fa'i, in the Tongyi unit, our predecessor Dada Zhenjun, I don't know, I guess translate that as true sage of great virtue. Okay, so again, he, that is very much the same. Okay, that they have all these qualities, and we definitely should learn from them. And the more, if we learn more about them, we get to understand, what they're like, their moral character. It's very touching. It's very moving. It's very inspiring. And definitely we need to, we should be inspired to become like them, follow, their way. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's see. Oh. All right. So, Confucianism and Buddhism, they both believe that the original heart and mind is good, okay, but it is blinded and cannot manifest by itself. So basically blinded by the human nature, right? The greed and all these other things. The ego, our five senses, or six senses, all these things, our desires, these attachments, these things kind of blind. Yeah, well, it's kind of, it's, the original heart and mind, that true good heart and mind is blinded by these things, or kind of obstructed by these. Therefore, we first must deal with our ugly nature or characteristics, such as, selfishness, narrow-mindedness, or narrow-minded and being petty, okay, jealousy, etc., right? As these are obstacles to the development of our moral character. Differences in moral character require different ways to nurture. Okay, so in terms of having concern for others, we must understand their situation, consider the problem from their perspective. Seeing their problem is like experiencing it for ourselves. Okay, so this is what we call empathy, right? So we have to, if we are trying to help others, or express, so it's not you follow a set formula. Say, this is this, to have, let's say, to certain virtue, I just do it in a certain way. I treat people in a very specific way. It's not like that. Again, everyone is different, and so we have to do things that it has to be appropriate, okay, for the person. Right. So in that sense, whereas the principle is, you can say, is fixed, but the application will depend on the situation, on the people, on everything. Okay. On the conditions. The Confucius said, right, so flattery disturbs our virtue. A benevolent person wishes to establish himself and help others become established. He wishes to achieve and also help others to achieve. In doing so, he can set an example of benevolence. All right, nurturing virtues can start from our thoughts, words, and deeds, and then be an example for others to follow, pushing ourselves and others. Thus, developing our virtues is not difficult, right? So, yeah, it's, again, this is, doing it for ourselves, right? But we also have to do it to help others, in the same way. So you can say, in the sense that's also like the Bodhisattva way, right? Because it's not just for yourself, it's also doing it for others. But also the fact that, benevolence, how do we express benevolence if there's no one to express it to? Okay, so we can't just be by ourselves and say, oh, I'm very benevolent or I'm very merciful. and we don't really engage in the world or with other people, we don't really express that, right? So that's just in our mind only, in our heart and mind only. We say, oh, I am this, I have this quality, but unless we put it into action, it's meaningless, right? Okay. All right. So next, precepts or discipline, moral discipline. It has its influence of thoughts, behavior, and fate. Okay. So why uphold and practice precepts? So this is Holy Teacher talking about the 5 precepts. No matter what the religion, precepts are a common element of the practice, right? So if we look at all religions, they all have their own precepts, commandments, things like that, their rules and regulations. They all have it. Okay, so because that's kind of like the basic level of practice. Our thoughts are the root of all evil. So we must cut off those thoughts if we are to nurture the womb of holiness, which unfolds and develops the bodhisattva, and to develop our wisdom or spiritual life. In cultivation, the 3 conditions or karma must be pure. So that is our body, or which basically our actions, our mouth, or the words that are words, and also our mind. Precepts help us to transcend from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Precepts are not intended as a way to put restrictions on us, right? I think, some people maybe, if they first encounter these precepts or these rules and regulations, they think, why do you have all these rules and regulations? It's kind of, they feel very restricted by these things. And so maybe they don't cultivate. Okay. So, but they're not intended as putting a restriction on us. It's actually, they're helping us, so you can say they're kind of like the rails, right? Of the train tracks, the rails of the train tracks that lets the train get to its destination, right? So, but if we don't stay on the tracks, on the guide rails, that becomes dangerous, right? I mean, if the train jumps the rails, then there's it's going to crash. Okay, so precepts is basically a limit or boundary, right? It sets kind of limits or boundaries about what is proper, what we should do, and what we shouldn't do. It's just like a map, right, which shows us where we can go and where we can't go, right? We know, oh, okay, I have to follow the roads, right? I can't just go straight from point A to point B. Okay, so and the limits or boundaries help maintain a certain sense of order as well. Okay, so if we exceed our boundaries or our limits, then we have violated precepts. All right, so practicing the precepts can help us manifest our compassion, subdue our improper thoughts, and allow us to attain the supreme Bodhi. Okay, so that's the Bodhi mind, the mind of wisdom, I guess. Okay, so, or the enlightened mind. Precepts are the basis of transcending the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. If we do not know to uphold and practice the precepts, we are unknowingly making mistakes and committing sins and bad karma. Okay, so although we may be performing merits, but it will probably not be enough to make up for the karma that we, or the sins. Right? The precepts keep us disciplined and can reduce the creation of many sins and karma. So the problem is, maybe people don't believe that, it is wrong to kill and eat animals. But, that's taking a chance. Okay, so why do the precepts say no killing? Is because, especially if it's coming from the Buddha, he's enlightened and he knows the truth. So he knows that, obviously killing only leads, besides, that's a more severe form, but action. But that definitely leads to reincarnation, and you have to pay it back because of the karma. So that's why it pays to understand the precept, understand why there are these rules and regulations or principles. Then it will be, at least we can reason that, oh, okay, yeah, it is the right thing. I mean, we shouldn't be killing. Then that there's a little bit more reason, I guess, than to say, oh, okay, so yeah, so I'll follow, I'll practice this. But if we have our own ideas about the why animals exist, and say, oh, they're for us to eat, then obviously you're not going to practice the precept. So again, we cannot be ignorant. Ignorance does not absolve us of karma or sins. Okay, so it's just like the laws of the land. I mean, we don't know the laws of the land, and we do something that breaks the laws, and we don't know about it, but we're still guilty. Okay, so it's the same thing with karma. Okay, we may think that it's nothing, but in fact, we're creating bad karma or committing sins. Okay. All right. Okay. So here's a story. Practice until the end, right? This is talking about two bhiksus. Bhiksu, that's a monk, basically, back, in Buddha's time. There were these two bhiksus who agreed to travel to Suravasti, right, to listen to the Buddha speak the Dharma. On the way, they became very thirsty. Now, unexpectedly, they came across a well, but as they drew up the water, they discovered that there were bugs in the water. Right, the first bhiksu was too impatient to deal with the bugs, right, and immediately drank the water. The second bhiksu, he just stood by and didn't drink the water. The first one, asked him, aren't you thirsty? Very, very thirsty? The second bhiksu replied, well, Buddha set the rules, right? If the water contains bugs, then we can't drink it, or we commit the sin of killing. I would rather die of thirst instead of breaking the precepts and live in negligence or indifference. The second bhiksu sucks, because he basically died of thirst, okay? So owing to the merit of his keeping to the precepts, right, he not only went to heaven, but he was also able to listen to Buddha speak the Dharma. And he obtained the truth vision, or basically having the clear perception of the truth. It was not easy to meet the Buddha, yet the Buddha criticized him severely. The Buddha said, well, if a bhiksu is unrestrained and lazy, even though he is in the Buddha's presence, it is like not meeting the Buddha. If a bhiksu is far removed from the Buddha, but puts in diligent effort and is not unrestrained, then he can always see the Buddha. Okay. So basically, I mean, the practice, sometimes, we should not be too, upholding the precepts, is good, of course, but we shouldn't do it blindly. Okay, we should have wisdom also, so like the first one, even though he drank and he probably, killed some insects, killed some bugs that he drank, that's obviously there's some karma there, but he can also make up for that too. Okay, so, we can't, he can still continue to cultivate and perform merits, things like that. Whereas the second bhiksu, he died right there, and so there's, no more cultivation that he could do, or he couldn't get any more merits after that, right? So, so again, we have to kind of understand, how to apply. So this is using our wisdom to apply the principles, or to, to practice them. Okay, put them into practice. Okay, so another story says consistent inside and out. Okay, so Sudha. Okay, so during the Tang Dynasty, there was Sudha. He was a Buddhist poet and friend of the monk Hansan. Okay, so just as an aside, basically these two, later on, they would be known as, well, after they become immortals in heaven, after they had attained the Tao, basically, they became known as the He He Er Shen, okay, the immortals of harmonious union, I guess, translation. We've seen them in a Dharma class at least once, maybe a couple times. Okay. The other interesting fact is that Hansan was the incarnation, of Manjushri Bodhisattva. Okay, so and Siddha was the incarnation of Samantabhadra, okay, Bodhisattva. Okay, so usually those Manjushri and Samantabhadra, they're always together. They're like together. Okay, they're like the two bodhisattvas next to Buddha. Okay, all right. But anyways, so one day, Siddha, he's herding his cattle to this Guoqing temple. Okay, so it happened to be the day when the monks were in the main hall for the reading of precepts and repentance. Siddha then herded the cattle into the front of the main hall. And he stood at the doorway and clapped his hands, saying, "Hey, the leisurely reincarnating sentient beings are now gathered here." The abbot was furious and said, "You crazy servant, how dare you cause a commotion and disrupt my reading of precepts?" Siddha laughed and said, "Not having rage is practicing the precepts, or is the precepts. A pure heart and mind is to be a monk or a cultivator. My nature is in harmony with yours. There is no difference." The furious abbot got up and strode over to Siddha and hit him. Siddha said, "I am not here to graze the cattle. They are the virtuous predecessors of the temple and have clerical or religious names. Right? If you don't believe me, just watch as I call each one." Okay, so then Siddha started calling each of the cattle by their clerical name. Basically, it's the name that, so these cattle were the reincarnations of, previous, cultivators in that temple. Okay. And they, so usually the monks, they have, besides the name that they're born with, that once they enter the monastery, they get another name. Okay. So this is the name that we're talking about here. And then, so after, he called them all out, then he admonished them, says, "Oh, you failed to uphold your precepts in previous life. Now you are a man in an animal body, right? Who do you blame for this? Although Buddha's power is great, you don't deserve Buddha's grace." Okay, so everyone heard this, they were astonished, realizing that they must cultivate properly, and they thanked the living bodhisattva, Siddha, basically. Okay, so, let's see. Yeah, actually, there was also another, about Siddha, I think it was, there's another poem, that he kind of wrote, as basically he walked, see, he has the ability, he can see, okay, he can see the people's karmas. So he walked by, this is completely separate from the story, but, he walked by this wedding feast banquet, and, he saw that, so he wrote this poem saying that basically, the sun is beating on the drums, which is basically made of the skin of, basically, his father or something like that, or, so, and then the son is marrying, I don't know, the grandmother, all sorts of things. So basically the people and also the animals, that were slaughtered for the feast, they were all relatives. They were all within the same family from before. So he wrote that poem, but, okay. Okay, so next story, let's see. Okay. So next story, it says, skillful at not forgetting. Okay, so these are two, during the Song Dynasty, there was, Cheng Hao and Cheng Yi. Okay, so they're brothers, and they're famous Neo-Confucian scholars. Right, the older brother, Cheng Hao, whose literary name was Ming Dao, okay, he was magnanimous, elegant, but also unrestrained. So he's like a Casanova. Okay. The younger brother, Cheng Yi, okay, whose literary name was Yichuan, was resolute in temperament and dignified. So one day the brothers went to a court banquet together, where there was fine food, drink, entertainment, and men and women laughing. It was extremely romantic and extravagant. Ming Dao is easygoing, and he devoted himself to having fun. But his brother, his younger brother, Yichuan, did not approve. Okay, so a few months later, then Yichuan, he could not hold back, and he asked his brother, that day at the court banquet, were you deluded by those well-dressed young men and women? Don't you think it goes against our true nature? Ming Dao, he was caught by surprise, and he says, oh, I forgot about that matter as soon as the banquet was over. So why are you thinking about it for so long? Okay, so, we need to forget things. Okay, so once the deed is done, we let it go. Okay, so in this case, Ming Dao, maybe he may have done some stuff that maybe he I don't know if it was proper, but after it was over, that was it. Okay. But his brother then kind of kept thinking about it. And so we need to kind of let go. It's like when we deal with things, we have to be like a mirror. Okay. We should always be like a mirror in that when, the matter arises, we deal with it in the proper way. Okay, so that's why. So when it's reflected off the mirror, it should be exactly how it is. So it shouldn't be like reflected. It should have a distorted image. Okay, so because that's basically we've through our ego, our attachments, and etc. We've distorted the situation ourselves in our mind, okay, and then so obviously the way we deal with it may not be right. Okay, so we have to deal with it exactly the way it needs to be dealt with. And then when it's over, okay, so then it's no longer in front of the mirror, and the mirror should be blank. And so we should forget. We should let it go once it's done. Okay, once we've done what we needed to do. Okay, so that's kind of the idea here. Okay, and another story, cannot be unkind. Okay, so in the old days, there was once a Taoist, Tan San. Okay, so this is monk, or Taoist monk, priest or monk, and a friend. They were walking on a dirt road after a heavy downpour. They were at a bend in the road when they came across a beautiful young woman. Okay, because she wore some pretty silk clothes with a silk sash. She could not cross the dirt road, without getting her clothes all dirty. So she just stood there frowning. When the Taoist Tan San saw the situation, he said, "Hey, miss, let me help you." So he picked up the woman and carried her across the road. Now his friend saw this, but he didn't say a word until it was dark and they had just arrived at the temple. Then he said to Tan San, we are monks. We cannot touch women, especially beautiful young women. It's very dangerous. Why did you do that? So the Taoist, Tan San, he laughed and he said, "What? I already let go of that woman. Are you still holding on to her?" Okay, so this is, again, similar story to the other one. Again, we have to let go of that. So these, becomes an inadvertent attachment, right? When we see these things. All right. Okay. So, some more holy teachers' words on these precepts. Right. The sentient beings of the Dharma ending age are rather dull and obtuse and cannot instantly see their true nature. So they must take precepts as their teacher. Right. In fact, this is what Buddha said. Basically before he passed into parinirvana, his disciples asked, they're going to lose their teacher. Who's going to be their teacher? And he says, use the precepts as your teacher. Okay, so even the Buddhas of all directions, they started their cultivation with precepts, right? So it's not like, this is, I'm above that. We are not above precepts. Okay, everyone has to practice the precepts. We can have a sudden realization of the truth and principles, but practice and cultivation is gradual, right? So we can say, oh, I'm enlightened, I'm awake, but we still have to practice, right? The practice is not instant. The practice takes time, and it's going to be for the rest of our lives. Okay, so everybody brings with them lifetimes of accumulated karma and temperament, and is not easy to get rid of in an instant. Therefore, we must take one step at a time and use precepts as a way to discipline, that is, to bring our body, mouth, and mind under control. Okay. Practicing precepts is like walking a fine line. One little slip, and we are easily in violation. Okay. If people complain that it is too bothersome and don't bother to understand, then they lose blessings and in the end have nothing. Isn't that a pity? One day, if they return to heaven, they can only stay in the cultivation court where they must cultivate. Yeah, so those who have not cultivated well in this world, if they do return to heaven, assuming that they do, then they kind of remain in this, you can say, this is like the outer court of where they have to continue to cultivate. But realize also that when you're there, we have no physical body, and therefore it's difficult to cultivate. And we're basically cultivating on our own. And so, again, it's hard to cultivate. And so, so eventually, usually, they're going to have to come back to this world to cultivate. Right? So do not think of precepts as a fetter or restraint, right? We cannot use it to judge others either. Okay, whether or not we uphold and practice the 5 precepts is an individual matter for each person, right? Whether we get full marks or fail in cultivation depends on individual effort and will. Holy Teacher will not force us, right? If we are not strict with ourselves and take the path of convenience, then there is no way to achieve moral integrity. So, so Holy Teacher is saying basically, precepts, among other things, are necessary for our cultivation, and also for developing that moral integrity or our moral character, okay, and those virtues. Okay. Let's see. Mindset. Okay. All right. So mindset, the refinement of human nature. Okay. So here is a story here. Yeah, this is probably the spooky story. Reincarnation happens in a single thought. Okay, so almost becoming a pig. All right, so there was this cultivator who was meditating, and his spirit, he could leave his body. I don't know if that's like astral projection or whatever. Okay, so his spirit traveled along the path he normally takes on walks. He also noticed that there was a house with a big red door, so he came across. Right, curious, he walked over to the house and opened the door. What he saw inside was a woman giving birth. He was deeply surprised and quickly retreated. There was also a midwife inside who saw him, giggled, and kind of beckoned him to come in, but he dared not go in. He turned around and walked back from the way, in the direction that he came from. Due to his anxiety, he returned to his, basically, it's kind of a shocking experience, I guess, and then he returned, his spirit returned to his body, and he became consciously aware that he was actually, sitting at home meditating. Okay, so after thinking about what he saw, he decided to investigate and found out that the house, or building, I guess, with the big red door was in fact like a pig pen. I mean, it's basically where they're raising pigs there. Okay, so the keeper said that a sow, a female mother pig, had just given birth to a litter of piglets, but that one piglet was dead at birth. Okay, so hearing this, the cultivator was so frightened he broke out in a cold sweat. Right, if his thoughts at the time were not proper, then, and if he had been aroused by what he saw inside, and given rise to any improper thoughts, or maybe was confused and kind of let that midwife kind of drag him into the house to talk, then he probably would have ended up being born as the piglet. Okay, so this is kind of I don't know if this is necessarily a true story, but definitely it's we have to be very careful of our mind, not just also in when we are awake, also in our dreams too. So sometimes maybe we're tested in our dreams, like if we are vegan or vegetarian, and in our dreams, but within our dream, we're offered meat or whatever, and we eat it, then we've broken our vows. So we're right. So basically, even in our dreams, we are in that just within our mind. We have to be the same as the outside. Okay, so again, that's something that we must be really careful. Okay, our mindset. Okay, so the next one, the mindset. All right, the mindset. The Zen master and the warrior. Okay, so there was a warrior who asked an old Zen master, "Do heaven and hell really exist?" The warrior was surprised to hear the Zen master let out a burst of grim laughter. The Zen master said, "You want to know about heaven and hell? Don't be overwhelmed. Take a good look in the mirror. Take a good look at yourself. Right? You are obese, uncivilized, ignorant, and incompetent. What learned man would waste time teaching an idiot like you? Go back and play with your stupid sword." Right? So after saying this, the old monk turned his back to the warrior. Well, not surprisingly, the warrior was outraged, and his face was red with fury, and he was short of breath. He drew his sword and was ready to chop off the monk's head. But just as he was about to take a swing, the old monk leisurely turned around to face him again and said, "Mister, now this is hell." Okay, at that moment, the warrior suddenly was awe-inspired with the righteous shock. Suddenly realizing the profoundness of the monk's words, he was shocked that his own rage and arrogance had created his own hell. So the warrior threw down his sword, knelt down before the old monk, and humbly repented. The old monk looked down at him and in a very gentle voice said, "Mister, now this is heaven." So, right, there's a saying, heaven and hell are, or the difference between heaven and hell is in the span of one thought. Okay, so whatever is in our mind, we can create heaven, we can create hell. It's all in our mind. Okay, now obviously, it can translate to the form on the outside, but ultimately it's all in our mind. Okay, so how we want it, so anger, obviously, rage, that's hell, that creates hell. Okay, so if we are loving, we compassionate, benevolent, then repentant, and grateful, these are all, you can say that's heaven. So if we want to create heaven, then we have to have that right mindset. Okay. Let's see. All right. Almost time. All right. Maybe. All right. We'll just finish this. Okay. Mindset. Okay, and fate. Okay. So the story about two beggars. Right. The son of a very wealthy elder in Shavasti held a great vegan banquet. Right. The two beggars went to beg for food. One beggar went too early and did not get any food, but the other beggar was there at the right time and got some food. Afterward, the beggar who did not get any food had an evil thought. Right? These cultivators are greedy for fine food and stingy with even a morsel or a scrap of food. They are truly sanctimonious, pretending to have high morals, and hypocritical, with not one bit of compassion. If I were the king, I definitely would crush their heads under the wheel of a chariot. Okay, so the beggar who got some food was full of gratitude and said, if I were the king, even with 7 consecutive days of vegan banquet for the monks is not enough to repay today's grace. In the end, the evil-hearted beggar was crushed to death by an army chariot, whereas the grateful beggar, he was embraced as a king, thus basically responding to their thoughts exactly, corresponding to their thoughts. So I guess this is probably one of the Buddhist stories, but it's saying again that whatever is in our mind, it can become reality. Okay, that could be the way it is, and it could be, if we're thinking bad of others, it could reflect on to us. Okay, come around to and get us instead. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, there's another story about that, but we'll skip that one. Okay, so basically hold to the center point. Okay, so Holy Teacher talking about the essence or the true nature, the mind, and the body. Okay, so the human heart and mind has 4 aberrations: resentment and rage. Okay, so seeking pleasure, suffering and misery, and fear. So every day that we are not happy, isn't it because these things are binding us? Okay, so in our cultivation, have we gotten rid of them? Cultivation is to get rid of these external obstructions. These vibes, he's talking about like these waves coming out, electromagnetic waves or whatever. But yeah, say these vibes will interfere with our self-nature. Why do they not affect Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? Because they hold to the center, right? Holding to that center point, exactly in tune with that center point. And that is the point Holy Teacher transmitted to us, right? The first treasure. So we hold to it, to and guard that point, right? So the world is full of desires and vexations. There are gossip, dualistic views, worries, etc., which constitute the world. And where do the vexation and worries come from? They all come from the heart and mind. So if we are to transcend from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, then we must free ourselves from these things. Where do we start? Of course, it is from that center point. Okay, so basically also, precepts, they, as part of the cultivation practice, they also help us to hold to that center point, because maybe it's hard to grasp, I guess, that center point. I referred to this center point in previous class as, something like the supreme harmony there at that point. Okay, so we have to kind of be harmonious with everything. Okay, so that when we can be harmonious with everything, then you can say that we are at that center point. Okay, so Buddha said, right, the heart and mind is like a painter. Okay, and one thought creates one reincarnation. That's very scary, right? So that story of the guy who almost reincarnated as a pig. Okay, so that the fifth patriarch Hongren said sentiments or emotions, they plant the seed. Once the seed is planted, then there will be growth. Without sentiment, then a seed won't be planted. Without the essence, there cannot be life. It is evident how important our mindset is. So, once we plant that seed, there's going to be the consequence, assuming, the conditions kind of bear out. But if we cannot let it go, right, then those conditions will appear and it will bear fruit, and we will see the results and the consequences. But just like in some of the other stories where it says, just to forget about the stuff, then we need to kind of forget about it. Okay, don't become attached to those things. The Japanese quantum physicist Emoto Masaru conducted experiments with water. Right? The experiments demonstrated that the mind or thoughts and the environment influences the nature of water crystallization. Right? By extension, they also influence interpersonal relationships, quality of life, and our destiny. So we must be very careful. Right? So this, you can go online and look up these water experiments by this Japanese researcher. Basically, how we, you can say, influence it's basically, the water. They take water and you kind of focus, like, or say good things or say bad things to the water, or you focus this intention to the water, and then they freeze the water, or freeze, so you get the water crystals, and they look at it, and what they found is that when you speak good words, you're kind to it, all these, what we say, the good qualities, we use the good qualities, express good qualities or intentions to the water, then the crystals are very beautiful. But when we have bad intentions or words, whatever, to the water, then the crystals turn out to be very ugly and kind of like malformed. Okay, okay. So actually, when we bless our food, actually, right, we always bless our food before we eat it. And we say, it's basically we giving grace, saying grace or giving thanks. But that's also a way to kind of bless, because everything basically, food, there's water content in there. And maybe, this can also affect other, materials too. But basically then it makes the food even better. Okay. And so also when we offer fruits, or food to the Buddhas, right? We make the offerings. It's the same thing. The Buddhas are blessing the food. And so in the same way, they are making the food or fruits better. Okay. Okay. Actually, since we're, didn't quite finish this, but, all right. So I think we'll probably end it here since already over time here. Okay. So, I'll end it. If I had said anything wrong, I asked the Buddhas for forgiveness, and also the transmitting masters and lecturers for their corrections. Yeah, thank you, everyone.